All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Danger Ranger podcast. This is episode 25. For episode 25, I put out a request on the YouTube page as well as on my Instagram for questions. We're going to run a Q&A today just because, I know you all have a lot of questions all the time, and it's a little bit quicker answering them all in a video format than it is replying to comments individually. Granted, I still try and hit all the questions I get in the comments and reply to those, but sometimes I get behind, and sometimes there's a lot of repeat questions. So without further ado, we're going to get right into it. We're going to start with our Instagram questions here, starting from the first, going to the most recent. Are you ever going to make it out to a Milsim West? Yes, at some point I will. Trying to figure out a life and more stable sources of income currently, but I definitely am going to make it out. I'll probably play alongside Blue Jean Operator and Mystery Boys Inc. on the Rust Force side, just for shits and giggles. But potentially would play NATO too. I don't know yet. It is a cool event. It is a cool, cool concept. It's a really great Milsim event. And it would be good to be able to pass, the knowledge that I've gotten, help run the classes that they do before the actual operations and the actual event starts. So yes, my answer is yes, I will attend a Milsim West at some point. If you had to choose a different SOF unit, what would it be and why? I'm assuming you mean if I had to choose a different one to join. I probably... we'll say it can't be Army just to make it easy. So if I couldn't join an Army SOF unit, I probably would have honestly gone SEAL, just because they are kind of cool. And I do have a little bit of naval heritage. I don't know if I've mentioned it, but I am related to Lord Horatio Nelson, who's this British admiral. So I think joining the Navy would be the next choice for me. However, if I still had the option of Army, I would have gone SF. So there's that. How much action did you see as a Ranger, if I could ask, with all due respect, bro? So we covered that. We kind of talked about this in the First Squad reunion podcast. I don't know if you saw that, but so me and Joe got our CIBs in Iraq for something that I can't talk about. We do have a legitimate NDA signed. It was not a firefight, unfortunately. It towards the end of the GWOT, like it was kind of a big gamble to whether or not you're actually going to see, actual combat. Team BAF was getting the most of it up until about the end of 2019. And then once 2020 hit, like there was no more missions really to do in Afghanistan because of COVID. Their commanders were all super risk averse to COVID. They didn't want us catching COVID from dudes on target. And two, they were trying to broker a peace deal between the Taliban and the US. So they weren't going out as much. They were still ISIS targets, but there wasn't really a whole lot of appetite to go after them. And then just the way that the rotations work when I was in, I never got to get on a team BAF when it was good, which was where the majority of the action was for 175 and for the whole regiment in general. Syria was cool for a bit for some of the dudes that got to get there when it was actually, when they were pushing on Raqqa in about the 2017 timeframe. There was a couple times when I was in Syria that things got a little close to kicking off to where we'd actually get to do something, but never happened. 2019, I don't think I've talked too much about my 2019 deployment, but we were QRF for this vehicle interdiction task force, and I was doing a detainee transfer the one time that our guys got to go on the ground. And they didn't get to shoot anyone, but so I haven't seen the traditional action, if you will, compared to a lot of other Rangers, which kind of bothers me. Like I joined to do that job, but at some point, like especially with the war in Afghanistan completely done, like you're chasing the dragon at that point. So I'm disappointed, but I'm happy with the experience that I did get to have because they were in a lot of cases very unique. And I did get to go to Syria. I got to go to Iraq. I got to go to Afghanistan, and had a lot of cool life experience that happened from those trips. Are Rangers actually doing any missions nowadays, or would that go to SF? Rangers are still deploying. I'm not going to say where. That's another question that I got, was where are Rangers deploying? I'm not going to tell you where they're deploying currently, just because it's a little sensitive. They're still deploying pretty routinely. It's about, I'm not going to say how many are deploying either. So they are still going out and they're still active in the Middle East. That's all I'll say. You also have, you're the 0300 package. You're the speed dial. You're the quick reaction force, like legitimately for the U.S. Like there's a whole package, and Rangers, like if something happens around the world, then Rangers are usually part of that package. The actions in Somalia, I want to say, were like back in the 90s. I want to say were part of that. And half of my deployments have been no notice deployments. So like you could get called up really at any time, and there's not really a reason to not join because there's not currently any crazy shit going on. Rangers are still deploying, one, and two, you could get sent anywhere in the world as a quick reaction force. So SF, from what I understand, they are still deploying. They're doing their traditional like training deployments in their AOs, but they're not doing it. It's a different mission set from Rangers. So Rangers are direct action, raid force. Like you bring us in to either pull security for Delta while they do something, or to augment them, or to be a complimentary raid package along with them. Like we're there to fuck shit up. We're not there to, even though we have in the past trained foreign partner forces, that's not our primary mission. 35 pounds is what he says you'll be rucking at RASP. I thought it'd be more like 50 to 60. So it's 35 pounds dry. That's with no water. And then you add, your canteens, your camelback, and your fighting load carrier with more canteens, and then your rubber duck, and it comes out to probably about 50 pounds total. So 35 pounds is the ruck weight period. And then you have, again, your FLC, you've got your water, and you've got a rubber duck. So it is closer to 50 to 60 pounds. If you're going into regiment as a 25-year-old, what would you do differently? Probably focus on mobility a lot more and prioritizing recovery after working out and such. I definitely would not ruck as much as I did when I was, 17, 18, preparing to join, just because that is hellacious on your knees and you don't want to hurt your knees more than you need to. So I would probably do a lot more low impact cardio. So I would swim. I would probably do, bike, elliptical, assault bike, and do probably 1-to-1 balance of running on the road or treadmill to a low impact cardio, just to avoid wearing your knees a bit much before getting in, and then focusing on recovery. I'd probably do a little bit more weightlifting, just to after being able to know that I can pass the push-up standard and the sit-up standard and the pull-up standard. What was the reasons you didn't screen for the unit? I talked about this in one of my earlier podcasts. It was, coming to the decision point of, all right, hey, like I either got to get out of the Army or I need to go to another unit, try out for a higher tier unit. And just the timeline for that, I would have had to probably spend at least 2 or 3 more years in regiment before I would have a solid chance at passing. But it is, I will admit, it is one of my regrets to not have tried that out in my career. I grew up reading Inside Delta Force, and I can't remember where the other one is. The one where they talk about the Battle of Tora Bora. The name escapes me right now. But I grew up reading those, and it was like, Delta sounds freaking sick. And I just kind of was at a point where I was like done with the Army and kind of apprehensive about how the political climate was. And it's like, yeah, Delta's pretty insulated from the normal political problems of the Army, but at the end of the day, they're still the Army. So, I mean, that is something that I kind of regret, which really sucks that I didn't stick around and at least give it a shot. Like that's what the advice was from the dudes that I did meet they were like, hey, if you have any inkling in your heart to do it, like, you should at least try it. And I didn't listen, and now I'm sad. Would you recommend joining the Army or Ranger Regiment? That's very broad, my guy. If you're going to join the Army, yes, join Ranger Regiment. Give Ranger Regiment a shot. You don't have to do infantry. There's plenty of other soft skill MOSs if you're looking to actually get like job experience. Like, there's a bunch of cyber options. You could be a medic. Like, if you're going to join the Army, I would definitely recommend trying to get into Ranger Regiment, because the quality of life there is significantly better than anywhere else in the Army. How long before you enlisted did you start talking to a recruiter? Let's see. I enlisted when I was 17. I had my parents sign the waiver because I was trying to get my option 40 at the beginning of the fiscal year. So it was like a couple months before my 18th birthday. I wanted to say I started talking to him in September, and I signed my contract October 3rd of 2014. So it was like about a month, I would say, before I actually like signed the paperwork. And then I was in the delayed entry program, finished high school, and then 2 weeks after I graduated high school in June of 2015, I shipped out to basic. How often did you work with SMUs? I worked with SMUs on 4 out of my 6 deployments. I'm not going to specify where or which ones. How hard is it to get into the 75th Ranger Regiment without option 40? I would say if you're doing your initial enlistment and you have the idea that you want to be a Ranger, get an option 40. It's a gamble. It's really a gamble. Like, in my OSIT class, we didn't have any option 40s available for the dudes who wanted to volunteer in OSIT. Same thing in airborne school. There just weren't any slots. So you're rolling the dice. If you want to get into Ranger Regiment and you sign up without an option 40, it's rolling the dice. Like, I can't give you exact odds, but it's not good. It's not good odds. So if you're coming from, another unit, this is from this dude looks kind of in the high school age. So I would assuming he's not coming from another unit. It is also kind of difficult to come from another unit in the Army. The ratio of dudes who'd been in the Army for a while to dudes who had just joined the Army in my RASP class was probably like more than 10 to 1. Ranger Regiment likes to get fresh dudes because we have a unique mission set and a unique way of doing things, and we don't like to have to break people's bad habits. That's granted, it's not necessarily the reason why you wouldn't be able to transfer from another unit. It's just better to come in fresh. And that's kind of, I think, is unofficially what I think. I mean, I can't speak for Ranger Regiment, but just seeing the demographics of RASP classes, like, it seems to me like they like fresh dudes that don't have any, prior experience, because we can mold them in our specific way. Do you know any guys in regiment who did online college? Yes. There was one dude that got his bachelor's while I was in, and there's several other guys that I know that got associate's degrees while they were in. And most of them would do a lot of classes on deployment, because the deployments we did have a lot of downtime. So they would stack on, 2 or 3 college classes, and they would get those done overseas. And then they'd come back and into the training cycle, they would, stick to like 1, maybe 2, depending on the intensity of the class, just because the training cycle is very intense. You don't have a lot of time, and it's hard to compete with college deadlines, as well as, training events where you're going to be leaving post for a couple of days without access to a computer, kind of thing. Have you worked alongside RMIB? No one has really talked about it. I sort of worked with RMIB on my 2020 deployment when I worked in the JSOC on BAF. There was a couple RMIB guys there, and I don't know how much I can say about them. They were helping provide intel for the Afghans for them to run their own missions. So they weren't, to my knowledge, running all of the intel for the actual strike force that was on BAF. And they did get their first completed mission when I was in there in the JOC. I remember because they brought in this badass type, I think it was a type 1A or 1B Kalashnikov 1947. No, it was a 1949 stamped underfolder with the milled receiver, and this thing looked like almost in pristine shape, at least on the inside. Like the internals were all well taken care of. It was all, it wasn't rusty whatsoever on the outside. The wood furniture was kind of a little bit old and janky, and there was some like sequins or some shit on the handguard. Afghans like to decorate their AKs, but I don't know a whole lot about RMIB. I do know that it is probably the place to go if you want to do intel, but it's a completely separate gig compared to a line battalion. So I really don't know a whole lot about RMIB, my guy. So I apologize. Do a lot of guys in 75th end up going to SF or SMUs after 5 to 10 years in regiment? Yes, I would say. Like, you spend 10 years in regiment, and it's either you're committed to coming back to regiment and being a platoon sergeant, and then working your way up to first sergeant. And it's pretty rare that you see that. A lot of the times you will see guys go SF or, try out for SMU. And it's probably even more common that dudes kind of, do 5 to 10 and then choose to get out because, 10 years is kind of like the turning point. It's like, hey, just do another 10 and get your retirement. But where has the regiment been deployed since GWOT ended? I am not going to answer that one. They are still in the Middle East. Did you ever work with RRC? And if so, what was it like? I have not worked with RRC. Best WASP song. So this one's a good question. A lot of Ranger questions. Now we got some normal questions. Best WASP song. I would say, if we're going for like legitimate best, that's a really tough one. I would say Widowmaker is up there, as well as Miss You. Miss You is a really good one. As far as personal favorite, you'll know because it's the intro to this podcast, Wasted White Boys. That one just gets me freaking fired up, man. So, and then last one for Instagram. In a podcast, the first sergeant said all the guys about to graduate RASP want to go to 175. And why is that? Because 175, first bat, best bat, baby. We're on the beach. Downtown Savannah is cool. We have good climate. We're not in Benning, and we're not in the Pacific Northwest where it's freaking cold and rainy and miserable. And with a bunch of super liberals. I mean, Savannah is a pretty liberal town just because of the college there. But first bat, best bat, baby. Repping the Kit God 1st Battalion t-shirt today. Shout out Cameron C. Fath. All right, moving on to the YouTube questions. Boom. Wham, bam. Thank you, ma'am. I think there's also a lot of queue of questions here. Yep, we got 17. Start from the bottom. Best MOS to be in the Rangers, 11 Bravo, hands down. Do Rangers use small arms that are exclusive to JSOC, so MP5, MP7, HK416, Spear LT, or is it just standard M4s? So we use standard M4s. We did switch over to the URGI upper receivers. So the Geisley URGI uppers in 14.5 inch. And I want to say that they're starting to get the 11.5 inch or the 10.5 inch. Before that, we had the Daniel Defense uppers, 14.5 inch and 10.5 inch. I really did like the Daniel Defense uppers. If you watch my most recent range video, I have it's not an exact clone build, but it is a quad rail upper that I have built. It's just beefy. It's heavy. I mean, it is heavy, which kind of blows, but like that thing is, you could club someone to death with that thing if you had to. I really like it. One of the companies in our battalion did have MP5s in the arms room, just because there were some dudes that did kind of a couple PSD jobs around Afghanistan, and they needed MP5s. And then we do have obviously the SCAR 16 and 17 in, I think I want to say that there's 3 different barrel lengths that we have those in, but if not, it's definitely 2, because we did have the shorties and then the longer barrels. And you could really, once you got your tab, like you could pick anything that you wanted. Granted, the 10.5 inch M4s there weren't as many of those around, so you weren't able to probably pick one up, because all the team leaders, squad leaders, not all the team leaders, but most of the team leaders and the squad leaders would have them. So moving on, You ever work with anyone on RSC? I'm pretty sure that's the same dude that asked on my Instagram. No, I have not. Did you work with any former Marines while you were in Ranger Regiment? I'm trying to rack my brains here. I don't think that we had any in my platoon. I did hear about, I think, one or two, either in regiment or battalion. We did have a former Navy guy in my platoon. Hilarious guy. I tell in one of my stories in one of my podcasts, I don't know which episode, but he showed up to battalion like over Christmas in 2019, and then like in 2020, like 2 weeks into it, he was over in Iraq with us. So that's how fast things can happen in regiment. Dude's a great guy. Great guy. When should I start contacting recruiters? I'm a senior in high school, though I'm not physically ready for RASP, and I don't want them to try and pressure me to sign before I'm ready. So you can sign a delayed entry program contract. You can, I want to say that you can pick your ship date to a degree. Don't quote me on that. Talk to your recruiter about it. And your recruiter is going to, do what's best for you. You don't need to be in freaking God mode shape to go to RASP. I mean, you do need to be in really good shape, but this is hard because I want to say that you do need to, but there's plenty of dudes that were not in as shape as I was, and I wasn't even in crazy good shape. But there's plenty of other dudes that weren't as in crazy good shape as I was who passed. So I don't know where you are at physically, my guy. 36 with the Guts profile picture. I want to say that looks like Guts from Berserk, but they're not gonna pressure you too much. I say that and watch them pressure you. So if you're senior in high school right now and you're graduating this spring, summer, early summer, I would say you probably need to start talking to them. If not, I would say enjoy your summer, train up during the summer, and then start talking to them, in August, September of this year. If you start training hard in June, July, August, start talking to them in August. That's 3 months of prep time that you can just dedicate your entire life to getting in shape. I would say September. And then if you have time, if you're not doing a sport or anything, I would say you could probably start training hard right now and be ready to go by like June. So 3 months is plenty of time to get enough shape and get into the best shape to be going to basic training. And again, you're still going to have basic training ahead of you too, which you can get in even better shape there if you're smart about it. Please tell me they have blueberry pancakes in Mountain Phase. Yes, they still do have the blueberry pancakes. So fun story. They're so good when you're in Ranger School. They're delicious. They're the best. But every single dude that I've talked to that went back to Dahlonega afterwards for, training events or just for fun, and they ate in the chow hall, they said that the blueberry pancakes did not taste like anything that they did when they were in Ranger School. So I actually went to Dahlonega before I went to Ranger School. We did a company training event in Dahlonega, and so I got to see the 5th phase of Ranger School and experience it before I got to go, which was pretty cool. I got my fucking ass kicked on this big ass we called it a long walk, and it was like a freaking 30K movement through the mountains, just up and down these hills. And we did this big circle around Camp Merrill there. Brutal. I'll tell that in another story, I think, some other time. How are the grooming and uniform standards compared to other special operations units, both garrison and deployment? So compared to like SF, compared to SEALs, I don't really know a whole lot about SEALs grooming standards, but we'll talk what I know. We'll talk SF, and we'll talk the Army SMU Delta. So they can have beards in garrison. They're, for the most part, I want to say that they are authorized to have beards. They can grow their hair out long. And for Rangers, you can't do that. Like, we can't grow our hair long. We're pretty stringent on hair standards as well as facial hair standards. You can't have a mustache in regiment. Like the rest of the Army, yeah, most of your units you can grow a mustache. Ranger Regiment, no mustaches. We have our own kind of standards book called the Blue Book, and it entails hair standards, facial hair standards, and then we do have what's called relaxed grooming standards. And this is if we're going to a specific spot in the Middle East where there's not a huge U.S. presence, And luckily our leadership has realized that, hey, like if there's a bunch of clean shaven white dudes running around in freaking, Syria or Iraq, it's not going to be a good time. So they do allow us to grow. I think it's like a month or two out from deployment. You'll start growing a beard, growing your hair out. They still want you to kind of, keep it trimmed and keep it respectable. I did hear of this one group in one of the outstations in Afghanistan. They were having a hobo contest to see how homeless they could get. And then one of the sergeant majors or first sergeants came through and was super pissed about it. So yeah, hopefully that answered your question. We do have our own uniform standards I didn't cover. So you have to wear a uniform during the duty day. So whether that's PTs, we have our own PT uniform. You have, your duty uniform, which is like your pins and patches. You have, clean boots, Air 670-1 boots. You're wearing your beret. You're wearing your dog tags. You have a copy of the Blue Book, pen and paper, Ranger coin. I mentioned dog tags. And that's the standard for walking around in garrison and for like official like ceremonies and like change of commands and whatnot. And then you have your field uniform, which you can wear fields, which is like a Cry garrison top or a Patagonia garrison top, as well as the combat pants. When I was there, we were issued combat Cry G3 combat pants, as well as the field pants with no knee pad, no external knee pad options. So we couldn't wear the knee pad ones, but we could wear the field ones without the external knee pad around headquarters. And you'd wear your patrol cap as well with your rank and your Ranger tab if you had one sewn on. And then you'd wear a subdued IR flag or a subdued cloth flag with name tape and rank. And then if you had a call sign, you'd wear your call sign on your left shoulder. Can you terrain associate for Ranger School Land Nav course, or is it best to stick with the basics? So I only did the Ranger School Land Nav course once. I didn't need to retake it. And I want to say that you can use there is definitely some terrain association that you'll use. There's a big ass swamp in the middle of the Land Nav course, and there are some hills that are pretty easy to see, and there are a lot of roads. You are allowed to walk the roads in Ranger School Land Nav. So if you refer back to the Land Nav class, there are a lot of attack points that you can use that gets you super close to your Ranger or to your actual point. And then you can do a little bit, you'll do a combination of attack points and terrain association to get close to your point, and then you'll dead wreck into your point. Did you work with any combat engineers while in regiment, and was their day in a life like and what was their day in a life like in regiment as a 12B, if you have any info? I don't know. I never met any 12 Bravos. Let me do a quick Google because I want to say that Sergeant First Class Salise was a combat engineer. Let me fact check that real quick. He was our most recent Medal of Honor recipient. Trying to find the Wikipedia article is fucking bullshit on him. Yes, so I was right. So Sergeant First Class Christopher A. Salise was a 12 Bravo before he joined regiment, and his first assignment was in 1st Cav in Fort Hood, and then he was transferred to a Special Troops Battalion, also in Fort Hood. He was assigned then to the 3rd Infantry Division, Fort Stewart, Georgia, where he was a sapper squad leader and platoon sergeant, and then he went to RASP 2 and was selected to serve in the 75th and was assigned to headquarters company in 1st Ranger Battalion, and he was our master breacher and engineer. So as a hopefully I didn't disappear there. So as a I'm not sure what your average day in life is of a 12 Bravo. So, apologize. There are 12 Bravos in the regiment, as evidenced because we have, Sergeant First Class Lees, who was a combat engineer. And they would be kind of, running the breaching and the building of mined wire obstacles for live fires, etc. But I really can't speak too much on their day to day. Not sure if I'm crossing any obstacle lines with this one, but Rangers that are not in RRC, do they get trained to go on low-vis operations and do PSD jobs? Yes. When I went to Syria, I didn't get any training, unfortunately, immediately. Once we got to where we were going, we kind of did vehicle drills and whatnot with, civilian clothing. I did drive across Syria a couple times, and we did wear, I want to say we were wearing cry pants and a t-shirt, so not super plain clothes, with our kit in the back with some belt feds and whatnot. And then there were some stuff that we did out in the city where it was more plain clothes. So I was wearing civilian pants, civilian shirt, and ball cap, sunglasses with a concealed Glock, and then, rifle kit, grenade launchers, belt feds in the trucks that we were using. If we were going to stay in a building for a certain amount of time, we would bring all that shit in just so it was quicker access. And we didn't have to go out to the vehicles in case shit started to go down. And in recent years, they did start actually integrating. If the platoon knew that it was going to Syria, they would actually get more training on running shit in plain clothes with concealed weapons, etc. So how do I prepare for RASP? Prepare my mindset for RASP. My fitness is well above standards and I'm growing stronger every day, but I've never gone through any serious mental struggle or conditioning. Then that tells me that your training isn't too hard. You don't obviously want to break yourself off when you're preparing to go and join the Army, but there does need to be days where you really push yourself to the absolute limit, or you have a buddy or a coach push you to the absolute limit. And this one's I could go on for a whole video on mindset, and go check out, there is a couple other videos I have about Ranger mindset, my guy, Charles Edwards. And then also, I don't know if you watch the podcast with me and my buddy Pierce Gakizi, but he has an entire program called the Ranger Blueprint. And the Ranger Blueprint, basically, it focuses on your mental conditioning and how to think and how to react to stress and how to cope with your brain when it starts telling you to quit. So I'd highly recommend you invest in that program if you're absolutely serious about it, because it is a fantastic program. How much wear and tear did Ranger Regiment put on your body, and how do you take care of your body in Ranger Regiment? So decent amount of wear and tear. I'm obviously as fucked up as some other guys have been coming out. My right knee does give me a lot of problems nowadays. I have to make sure I warm it up really good before I run or before I squat. My low back has kind of had problems since the beginning of my career. They kind of flared up pretty bad in Ranger School. Just the amount of time that you spend under a rucksack is pretty significant. So it really kind of can mess with your spinal column. Shoulders, sometimes they can be kind of fucky. And then I did get at least 3 solid concussions. My first one was in Derby phase. It was like during a RAP week, during this combat water survival test, the zip line that they have you do. I let go the wrong way, or I tucked my legs the wrong way, and I smoked my head on to Victory Pond into the water pretty solid. Had a killer headache the rest of RAP week. Was not a good time. And then my next one was when it was my third Florida. We were doing a jump into Florida, heavy ass rucksack, and I had a really bad landing on the drop zone, smoked my head, was in a leadership position too, which really sucked because I was fucking out of it a little bit, and had a wicked headache. So got my bell rung a few times, and then did get was around a lot of explosions and whatnot, which I don't think had a huge problem on me, or had a huge effect rather on me. To take care of your body, I did get a book called The Supple Leopard, kind of I wouldn't say a cult classic per se, but it's more of a it can kind of be controversial, but a lot of the stuff in that book is phenomenal, as far as like the mobility drills, the assisted stretching with bands, and whatnot. So I would, have a problem with my body, and I would find stretches that would do it, and I do 3 or 4 of those consistently until the problem became a non-issue, and then I rehabilitated by strengthening and targeting that area during strength training, and then I took a more serious effort into warming up before conducting exercise. So that's that I could also do a whole nother video on how to take care of yourself in the Ranger Regiment. But how much spare time do you have in regiment? Specifically, could you train competitively in MMA while being an active duty Ranger? Oh, that's a hard one, my guy. You don't have a lot of spare time, and if you're looking to compete in amateur MMA, like legitimately, to where you're doing fights, I don't think that would be very feasible. One, your leadership is probably not going to appreciate you getting your fucking head bashed in outside of work, competitively. We did have a lot of guys that would roll jiu-jitsu outside of work, and then there are a few dudes that I met at the there was an MMA gym that I went to for a few times in Savannah, where I did meet a couple other Rangers doing boxing and whatnot. So not to say that you can't go and train. You can not to say you can't go and roll jiu-jitsu or roll or train Muay Thai or train boxing. But if you're wanting to compete in MMA, like with the weight cutting and with all the time and prep that goes into it, it's going to be really difficult, and your focus should be on being the best Ranger you can be, and not the best MMA, artist that you can be, because one of them is, they're both life and death. Don't get me wrong. However, you should just pick one, honestly, is what I would say. Like, if you want to, compete in MMA, like, definitely go for it. I would say, make it happen. But if you want to have a career and a successful career as a Ranger, and you don't want people thinking you're, slacking out on your job, then I would recommend focusing on your career in regiment. And then you can still, go to jiu-jitsu, you can still go to Muay Thai classes, but I wouldn't recommend trying to pick up any fights while you're in regiment, unless you're like on leave, unless you can time it right. But even then, like, I would say it's probably too much work. My son is graduating from AIT at 17. Does he have to wait until 18 to start RASP? I am pretty sure that he does not. Pretty sure that he's good to go. He joined the Army at 17. He'll be good. There are some young guys that go to RASP. I think that there was a 17-year-old in my RASP class, if I remember correctly. How did you acclimate to life mentally, emotionally after time as a special operator? Still working on that one. I get sad a lot when I see YouTube videos of Cool Ranger edits, and I'm like, fuck, man, I miss that shit. How do you make peace with the mission? So the mission at the end of the day comes down to the boys, honestly. It means, at every level, like as a private, like, hey, like, I need to do my job perfectly because I need to not, be a liability to my team. And as a tab, you're like, hey, I need to show that I can be trusted as a junior leader in this organization, and I need to make sure and look out for my private. And then as a team leader, you're like, hey, I have 2 or 3 or 4 guys that are underneath me. I need to be on my shit so that we all come home together. It really does, and it's super cliche. You hear it in every war movie. It becomes about the dude to your right and left. It doesn't matter where the fuck you are. You could be in fucking Africa. You could be in fucking the South China Sea. Like, wherever Ranger goes, like, they're going to go to fucking destroy and wreak havoc and to bring all their boys home. Like, that's, at the end of the day, really the Ranger mission. It's a fraternity with machine guns and explosives, and the ability to jump out of planes and be anywhere in the world within 18 hours to go fuck shit up. Kind of like how Conor McGregor flew his boys in from fucking Ireland to go after Khabib back in, I think that was, 2016? I don't remember. But we're basically that. We're basically the boys you call up when you got to get shit fucking settled with somewhere in the world, and you need it done quick and well. RMIB, another guy asking about RMIB. Definitely recommend, if you have a bachelor's in cybersecurity, definitely would recommend RMIB for you, my guy. Like, that sounds like a cool spot to be. Granted, not as cool as being a line infantryman, you know, being a team leader, being a fucking machine gunner, but I mean, that's still pretty cool. That's some really good work experience. You are part of, you know, SOCM, so you'll have that on your resume, and plenty of networking opportunities. You will work with contractors a lot outside of the Army, so you'll get contacts with companies like Paladin, or what the fuck is it called? It's not Paladin, Palantir. Um, Palantir, a few other ones that I don't remember the names of honestly right now, but that would be a solid gig if you were to pick another job inside a regiment. So you might have been the same guy asking on my Instagram, but oh man, there's still more. Jesus. Uh, would you consider the Army actually worth making a career of today? I would say it's tough. I would say that yes, it is if you have that desire in you. There's still, even with all the political problems that the Army is experiencing right now, I think that's going to be a temporary thing. Who knows how long it'll take to get back to kind of normal, but I think that there needs to be good dudes on the inside that are working to change it, that are willing to play the long game of staying in for 20 years and becoming a decision maker at a high level, to try and get it back to what it once was. So if you are going to join the Army, go soft at some point. You mentioned trying to go to SFAS. So I would say, you know, go to Ranger Regiment, go to, you know, the freaking SFAS, go to the Special Forces battalions. You don't want to be in the regular Army right now. I can tell you that much. So, and that's advice to anyone. Like I wouldn't try and join the regular Army right now. And then last one, could you start a series on how to be a good leader, starting as a young leader and working into an older one, or leadership in general? Yes. I will probably make a video or two on leadership. I'm not, you know, an expert on it, and I wasn't probably the best leader the Ranger Regiment ever saw. I would say I was average, but it is something I can talk about at least intelligently. I have read a lot of the books on leadership as well, so we can talk about that. But this was a long video, so I'm going to end it here. I answered all the questions. I'm going to take down the question sticker on my Instagram story so that I don't get any more and people won't get disappointed with me. But hopefully this answered y'all's questions. Let me know if you want me to elaborate on any of my answers here in the comments section. And we'll catch you all this Friday for our lethality video on open danger areas. Take care.